Now for part two on documenting dreams.
When you think about, your memories and specifically your childhood memories, what is your first and best childhood memory?
Oh wow. Um so one that's there are lots. I had a beautiful, colorful, rich childhood. We weren't hurting for anything. We weren't rolling in money either. And my parents did the absolute best to provide and expose and give us every opportunity that they felt like they could possibly provide. One childhood memory that stands out, and I'll tell you why. I was on the playground at Sarah Rawson Smith Elementary in the northern part of the city of Atlanta. And I must have been in third grade at the time. And there were about four friends, all boys, because everything, boy and girl separate at that age, right?
Right.
And we were, sort of at the early stage of the hip hop era. So we were out on the playground and we were rapping to each other, like we were making up raps. Taking turns and freestyling, taking turns and sharing these very third grade level verses with each other. and one of the friends in that group was a young boy by the name of Andre Benjamin. Who Andre Three Stacks, who obviously grew up to have a very successful rap career. I bring that up because I think that we often associate greatness and a high level of achievement with some, I don't know, like untouchable, rare gift, right? That only certain folks are born with, or whatever the case may be, right? And I think that just that lesson that greatness is all around us constantly. And you never know who is going to be, the next Andre 3000, or, we don't know who the next Jenelle Hanes is, or the next Chuck Meadows, or whatever the case may be. These opportunities, greatness lives around us. It's everywhere. If you combine folks' talent and interest and with their opportunities and resources, like greatness can happen on many scales. And so that's a memory that sticks out, and something that has meaning to me even today, some 40 years later.
Yeah.
Just in terms of where greatness lives and where it lies, and how it's everywhere.
Yeah, but pretty dope memory, if I can say so myself. So if we go back a little bit to Jim Adams, I one of the things that I feel like is a little known fact that I would share with people about you in the space where we were working, right? So for our listeners who don't know, I actually got to be an employee in some ways, if you want to think about it like that, of yours. And it was so funny, talk about surprising people. I was like, Chuck's actually a great cook. Like, huh? I'm like, yeah, he owned this dope restaurant, on the West Side, and he competed in this burger competition, and everybody's like, what? And I'm like, yes. And I said, my family, we go out and try to find the best burgers, and the burger we have yet to find to compete with is the bougie burger. So please, for our listening audience, I have two questions. One, how did you come up with the concept? Because it is a great burger. And then two, what is your favorite thing to prepare?
Okay. Yeah. So that's a great. So thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. I mean, so just taking a step back, because there was a sort of a path to the burger, right? Mm-hmm. So the whole goal of Jim Adams, again, I have farming in my family that goes back. Literally, we have the deed that they were literally my great aunt and uncle. And so when they were freed from slavery over in sort of the eastern part of Georgia, they farmed a piece of land that they that the government helped them finance it. They had to purchase it and pay it off. So they purchased it, paid it off, raised a family there, and several of their children then went off and purchased land and farmed successful. So generations of successful farming in the family that was starting to, or is starting to die out a little bit just as folks get older. Mm-hmm. And I saw that and really wanted to try to find an opportunity to build on that. Also knowing, right, that there's a need in Atlanta and lots of metropolitan areas for just access to high quality, fresh, locally grown produce. And so Jim Adams was a business that, it was a farming and, like I said, food service retail business. And so we were connecting folks to locally grown produce by, we had a retail storefront that was a farmer's market as well as a quick service, casual dining restaurant. And of course, locally grown beef makes for some great burgers.
Yes, indeed.
Working with several chefs that were hand selected, and that's when I pushed back a little bit. So I, to the extent that I could be considered a cook at all, was only because I was learning from individuals on the team that we built, right? And so we went and sought after 3 particular chefs who specialize in, one of them specializes in vegan foods. One of them specializes in healthy, good tasting recipes, specifically with a southern flair, right? And so working with that team, we built a number of recipes for lots of different things, sauces and chicken salad and lots of great things. And so burger was really just a combination. Bougie Burger was a combination of some great locally raised beef with a particular sauce that was made in house that one of those chefs developed, offered the recipe for. And so we were just replicating running the play that particular chef called. That sauce on that burger with some sauteed mushrooms and onions. Still may be the best burger that in my personal bucket. Yeah, and one of many things that I miss about the restaurant. We had a 2-year run and ended up succumbing to market forces, I think is what I'm supposed to say, but we eventually ran out of business. Margins are tight in that type of operation, but I'm still proud of the 2-year run that we had, especially, building under my leadership, and I point that out because I didn't have restaurant or retail experience coming in, but was able to pull some folks together and a great team of individuals who shared the same passion. And so to the extent that we were able to enjoy some success, it was because of those individuals bringing their talents in different ways and bringing together something I still think was very special and something that hasn't been replicated. And definitely look forward to bringing it back in some form down the line, hopefully not too far down the line.
No, that would be really good because it was also a gathering spot, if I can say that, for many families, those, that you knew and some that you didn't know or came to know, would come to know. And it felt good to be in a city like Atlanta and be able to get a touch of our ancestors, right? In front of us, whether it was on the table, whether you were eating it or just feeling it. And I think the best experiences come from those authentic ideas, right? So, absolutely. You brought up your family's legacy of, land and sustaining that land and that property. And it just made me think about heirs estate. And there are very few states in the United States who don't fall under that law. And so I'm just curious, how was your family able to, talk about heirs estate for one, and then also kind of help me understand how your family was able to maintain and sustain that land, specifically in the Deep South, where so many families are losing those valuable properties because they don't have, either understanding, or they're those who have migrated north and are just like, I'm not going back. You know what I mean? And that land is going to be what it is. Somebody gave me a chunk of money. I'm good, but there's still family that exists on those properties. And then that heirs estate comes into place. And then, the lines get blurred and people lose out. And so talk about how you all were able to maintain that, and then and heirs estate for our listeners who don't know exactly what that means.
Yeah. So I mean, and I'm not the expert to delve deeply into that topic myself. I'm still have some things to learn. I can tell you about, I guess, my family's experience in particular, and ways in which I think it really it links in my mind to how broken our food economy is. So when you talk about farming, and honestly, specifically Black farming in the South, our local food economy is broken. And so just to give you a little bit of history about how this particular property has sort of been through different iterations in our family, right? And so it was purchased outright. It was paid off. My great uncle, Jim Adams, was the biggest property owner on his street, and so the street, the practice is to name that street after the biggest property owner. And so the farm sits at the end of Jim Adams Drive, right? And so started as a traditional or conventional farm, and really grew. I give so one of Jim Adams' descendant, Willie Adams, was a farmer, or still is a farmer on that property, and has been for many decades. And he enjoyed a lot of success, and built the land up to an industrial scale farm, right? And so he was actually, for a while, one of the very few farmers in the northern part of the state that had a contract with McDonald's to produce chicken for chicken nuggets, for example, right? And so that type of scale, several very large chicken houses where they're producing, thousands of pounds of poultry on a regular basis. Wow. My cousin actually stepped back from that type of farming because he saw some of the problems inherent with it, right? So mass production, so that industrial scale typically lends itself to using high amounts of pesticides, inorganic fertilizers, herbicides that can be harmful to the environment on a larger scale, right? Just lots of practices that are common in industrial farming that aren't necessarily good for the earth. And so he actually converted the farm from this industrial scale to a farm that focused on sustainable practices, right? And so that those sustainable practices tend to take a lot of the machinery and a lot of automation out. And honestly, it makes the farm more productive from, just from a healthy, high quality produce standpoint. But it is a bit more labor intensive. And so if you're a farm that's looking to make that pivot, then it can be a challenge. It can be difficult, and it can be difficult to raise produce at the scale to where you have those contracts with those larger retailers that are going to provide you the financial resources to make it economically sustainable. And so that is the pitfall that we fall into, and that's because the market still values, unfortunately, the farmer who can ship truckloads of strawberries from 2,000 miles away, right? Versus the farm that can produce on a much smaller scale a locally grown, naturally grown strawberry, right? And so the economy, that food economy, in many ways is still broken, and it's having an impact on all of our farmers. But it's definitely played a role in what I would refer to as the demise of independently owned and operated, Black farms in Georgia, which is a part of our economy. It's just part of our agricultural history in this state, right? Folks who literally came out of slavery, purchased land, and immediately became productive contributors to that agricultural economy. The model for that has just shifted and changed and broken in many ways. And we're losing, a lot of our history, and equally as bad, losing access to healthy, locally grown produce, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Well, that story needs to be shared more often, and people, going back to you explaining things and making it relatable. That's something in the African American community we can all relate to in some capacity. Everybody, whether you Midwest, the furthest north if you Black, you got some family down south, right?
That's
Like,
right.
you tell people you go visit, I don't care where it is, New York, Pennsylvania, you can go to Chicago. And oh yeah, I got family in North Carolina. Everybody goes down the same path. What's the last name? Oh yeah,
Right. That's right.
And so, I think it's so important when you make that connection, because it reminds us that our roots are very much, in the South, very much a part of slavery, very much a part of going back to Africa. I used to joke all the time, but seriously, that everything comes from Africa. You know what I mean? And then, and people were laughing.
Cradle of civilization.
Listen, our very being and the seeds, of our bodies comes from Africa. I believe that. I know it to be true. I know the things that have evolved, whether it's clothing, music, food, of course. You know what I mean? Some of the ways that we think and manage ourselves in certain spaces is because of that background. And so, I'm always intrigued and happy to hear that people are preserving some of that history. Whether it's here, whether it's going back to figure out where your family come from and learning your lineage. And so that part of your story is so important, for our listeners here today. So thank you so much, for sharing that. And it leads into, we're almost done, because you have so much to share. I would love for us to talk more. So perhaps, episode 26, since 13 seems to be your lucky number, which is double the luck, right?
There you go.
That, we talk about legacy. And so we know this is absolutely a part of that legacy and that story, but, what do you hope to be your legacy or your living legacy?
Yeah. That's where that bridge builder comes in. I mean, that's what I want my legacy to be. I think back to a conversation that I had with a Morehouse professor my freshman year at Morehouse. And I was telling him how, I was this charged up kid out of Washington Park that was ready to make a difference and impact the world and just kind of take things over and shake things up, and be this, this aggressive, active, high stakes difference maker. And he talked me down from that, which was a shock at first, right? It was one of the tougher conversations I'd had, right? Because I couldn't understand why, this Morehouse professor would, do what I felt as, sort of throw cold water on the fire that was within me. Yeah. And his point was, once I calmed down enough to listen, was that, if you take this approach, where, you're this loud and visible, person that comes and shakes things up and overturning tables and tossing the old way out and all this kind of stuff. He said, they're going to see you coming and they're going to make sure that you don't get a seat at the table. You're going to be excluded. You're going to be relegated. And you may make a few small changes in a relatively small space, but you will not get the opportunity to affect the type of change that you are looking to make. And that was a wake-up call for me, and in many ways, what even now sort of drives the way I approach things. And so, if you can't gain trust, if you can't build relationships, if you can't garner respect, if you can't give folks a reason, right, to include you, you will never get close enough to have the impact that you want to have. And so that conversation there, did a lot to help me pivot and adopt what I think has been a successful approach to driving change, which is, building those bridges, looking for opportunities to have an impact, right? And then figuring out, and then it involves a lot of listening, a lot of relationship building, a lot of listening, a lot of gaining confidence, a lot of, and not just building relationships for the sake of building relationships, but it's understanding where people really are, listening for understanding and understanding what those true needs are, and not marching in with what you think is the answer to their problems, but listening to what they feel and want and need, and then developing a corresponding action plan, right? And that in my mind is that bridge, right? If it's between two different sets of people, two different groups of people, two different groups of stakeholders. If it's the bridge between an unsolved problem and that solution, whatever that is, that's where I feel like I do best, and that's what allows me to run a restaurant, even though I have no food service experience, because I am going to look to bring together the people with the expertise, with the perspective, with the resources, with the needs, right? And build bridges across those groups and make those connections. And that's where, that's where I feel like there's a lot of just untapped power, right? And bringing folks who aren't together for a particular purpose or for a particular cause.
Absolutely. And, as you are building that legacy and creating those bridges, or building the bridges for all of us to walk across or connect, there's people supporting you, and you know what I mean? There are people backing you. So if you had to name, one of the people that's in the trenches that gets the least amount of credit, who would that be?
Yeah, so it's not many people would know her name, but there's I'm gonna say her name out loud, but Renee Blumenthal. Okay. So Renee, in many ways, opened several doors for me that very few people are aware of, just the impact that she has had on my career and my life in general. So when I finished Morehouse, I finished grad school at Harvard. I was looking for a job. I was thinking I would probably go to DC or New York or somewhere where the job market was a little bit more, had a little bit more opportunity for someone with the type of education I had. Mm-hmm. And I'm tossing my resume out to different people in different places. And Renee saw my resume and created a position for me in the governor's office here in Georgia. So I was able to come home, immediately use my degree, and immediately plunge into a position where I was able to have the kind of impact that I was looking, right? The opportunity to have the kind of impact that I was looking to have. And so as I was 23, is that right? Yeah. No, maybe a little older than that.
No, probably like 25, 26.
Oh, yeah, about 24, 23, 24, somewhere in there.
Okay.
And I was deputy policy director for Governor Roy Barnes at the time, because Renee saw me, took a chance on me, and said, hey, I'm going to give you this opportunity. So she was policy director. She hired me as her deputy, and I was working on things like economic development, right? So immediately having this opportunity to drive, to make a difference for my home state, right? And and do lots of powerful and impactful things because of that opportunity. And so I did that. That opportunity parlayed, sort of created other opportunities for me. Several years down the road, she offered me a job at City Hall. And so I was able to move from the state level to City Hall. At the time, I was working in the finance department, and again, it was an opportunity where, so in a particular instance, there was a department that needed to be rebuilt. And so I was part of that rebuild, and then was able to take sort of ownership or lead the rebuild of the Office of Budget and Fiscal Policy, and I eventually became the chief of that office. And then further down the road again, my entry into the Metro Atlanta Chamber, where I eventually became vice president of public policy, was an opportunity that Renee brokered for me. And so I think people from the outside saw, Chuck's doing his thing. He's moving from here to there, and leveraging these opportunities and that kind of thing. And a lot of times, what people don't know is it may be one person, right, that believes in us, and if we're managing that relationship well and doing right by that one person, and one person can make a huge difference, right, in your career. So there are at least 3 entries on my career. As far as in my career, in terms of positions that I've held, that there's one person that was largely responsible for that. And of course, you sort of build that experience, and then you can go off and do other things. But yeah, she's definitely someone who most folks don't know her name, and even fewer folks are aware of the type of just space she placed in me. and the doors that she opened for me. And you know what that does is I feel equally compelled to do that for other people, right? Because I wouldn't be here if it weren't for that type of outreach, right? That individual outreach, and so I feel compelled to do that for others as well.
Oh, absolutely. Pay it forward.
Yeah.
Pay it forward. Okay, this is the last portion, but also one of my favorite portions of the show. It's called Finish These Statements.
All right.
All right. I
am still growing.
Okay. My favorite song is.
Oh man. So it's hard to pick one. But, if I had to pick one favorite song. Overjoyed by Stevie Wonder.
Ooh, that was a song that Jerry and I walked out on our at the end of our wedding.
How about that? All right.
It is.
All right. I love it.
My why is.
My why is because there are people who there are people who need me. There are people who need me.
Agreed. People think I am, but I am really.
People think that I am an extrovert, but I really need alone time
to become introverted.
Absolutely. If I don't have that sit by myself time, I would never be able to do anything.
You got to bring it down. Well stated. I like that. I get really nervous when.
I get really nervous when I evaluate myself as a parent. And when I reflect on how much these two little lives that their mom and I are responsible for, that makes me nervous. Joyful, anticipation, all those types of things, but nervous as well.
Shout out to the Meadows girls. They're doing their work. If they're making you nervous, they're doing what they're supposed to do. Okay. When I hear blank, I'm running to the dance floor.
Ooh. I would say Southern hip hop from the 90s.
Okay.
So I didn't pick one song.
I was going to say you were very specific, but not really. Right. Let's be clear. Here's a region, and here's the genre.
Region and the time frame.
Right. There you go.
Pretty much anything in there. Yeah.
So take all that. I know all the lines too.
Ooh. Just about every Outkast or Goody Mob song ever made, for the most part.
Appropriately so. Rise up. Okay. Can't Stop, Won't Stop.
I can't stop, won't stop, striving to do what's right. I can't. Yeah.
Indeed. Well, family, that concludes episode 13 of Documenting Dreams. Thank you so much to my extra special guest who believes that he's just an ordinary guy, but he's really doing extraordinary things as this extraordinary person. I'm so grateful to know you and for your gift of being a bridge builder. I truly believe when we start to put one foot in front of the other and walk in our gift, it makes room for us. And you are definitely doing that as a pillar in this community. You give back and you do it without thinking about it, considering the least of these. And so the blessings that will come from that ability that you have to pay it forward in those spaces I know will be in abundance and we'll get triple fold. So thank you so much for being that person.
Thank you.
Being that
Thank
friend.
you. Thank you for what you're doing. This is great. I enjoyed it.
I'm so glad.
I appreciate you for what you're doing. This is important work.
Thank you so much. This is my happy place and I'm glad that you got to be a part of it. So
absolutely.
Enjoy the rest of your day and thanks again for being here.
All right. Thank you.